to the How Do I Become podcast. I'm your host, Chris Gavea. In this episode, we'll be exploring how do I become a pastry chef. Thanks so much for listening. Welcome, Nina Helfenberger, a pastry chef in the San Francisco Bay Area. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks very much for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for inviting me.
So tell us a little bit about what your current position is and some positions you've held in the restaurant industry in the past.
So, right now, my current position is I work for Facebook. Actually, the company I work for directly is called Flagship Culinary Incorporated, and I am a pastry supervisor. So, my position, I actually oversee two of the cafes on the Menlo Park campus, not the main campus where the main Facebook sign is, but we serve about like 1,500 people
Oh,
daily
wow.
between those
Wow.
two. And I also oversee another small food concept. And a food concept to Facebook is what's usually just described as a kind of like a restaurant style where they just serve tacos or pizzas and such like that. They just serve like one menu kind of every day.
Okay.
Rather than the cafes, we serve different menus, different themes every day. So
Okay, great. And you oversee specifically pastry, so that includes baked goods of all sorts or desserts or a little bit of everything.
pastries, baked goods. We don't do a lot of breads per se because we
Hmm.
have a separate bread team on Facebook
Oh,
that
wow.
does all the bread production for throughout the campus. So they do a lot. Their team is huge, and they have the kind of the overnight ghost shift that so they work from 9 to like to 5 in the morning. So and they get that ready. So yeah, but it's great. They do everything so well. Yeah.
And so how long have you been in that position?
So I started with Facebook in November, just right after Thanksgiving, and so I've been there for let's see, almost 10 months now. But I really only worked in the kitchen for 4 months before we closed for this
Oh,
pandemic.
sure.
So
Right,
it was
right.
like an abrupt stop in my career, and it's definitely hard. So.
I bet. So how are you staying fresh with your skills?
So I like to try and bake every once in a while. My team and I, we do a lot of engagement meetings during the
Mm.
week. And so right now, one of the activities I do with my team is we do like weekly pantry challenges. So they're kind of like, you know how Chopped is
Yeah, sure.
is done. So we just choose a variety of three different random ingredients, and I challenge my team to come up with a creative dessert with those things.
Mm.
And we have a Zoom meeting every Friday, and we just show each other
Oh, wow,
our
cool.
desserts. So it's really cool that I get to engage with my team on that level because I don't see them every day now, and it
Hmm.
keeps my skills fresh and their skills fresh too.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting and unique. And before Facebook and this very creative, oversight position, you were at the Four Seasons, or what were you doing in that position?
Yeah, so previously I was at the Four Seasons in East Palo Alto, and I was a
Hmm.
junior pastry sous chef there. And so I basically oversaw the pastry kitchen, also just kind of like how I do now. Our production levels are pretty different than Facebook.
Sure.
Our
Yeah.
hotel is mostly based on business customers. So we
Hmm.
do a lot of banquets, and so that's a lot of like custom desserts. And then also we take care of the restaurant that we had there.
Okay, great. So different styles, but definitely the credentials speak for themselves, I think. So take me back to when you were in your career decision making. What led to pastry school or deciding that the restaurant industry was for you?
Sure, yeah. So I actually got inspired to do pastry when I was in my I would say early teens, I guess. When I was around
Wow.
like 12, 13 or so, my family took a trip to Europe, and we
Mm.
stopped in Paris because we had a few extended family members there. So, going around Paris, they are
Sure.
basically the capital of pastry. A lot of our techniques that we use today in the industry comes from a lot of the French chefs, from
Mhm.
there. So, just going around seeing a lot of the patisseries and the bakeries, really inspired me to want to go into this industry.
Wow. So you knew from a very young age and kind of cultivated that interest yourself, or did you seek formal training, or kind of how did that develop?
Yeah, so like, when I was younger, I've always was kind of interested in baking here and there. So I've
Mhm.
always helped, my mom do a couple things, casual things like cookies or pies and such. I never had any like formal training when I was in high school. I know that there's a lot of high schools out there in the US that offer students who are interested in the culinary industry, they have a chance to, learn basic skills during high
Oh,
school,
really?
and they get to
Interesting.
compete and do, a lot of fun things. And so I wish I had an
Yeah.
opportunity like that. So
And then I guess after you finished high school, then did you go to culinary school, or did you remain self-taught and just start working in kitchens? Kind of what happened after that?
So after high school, I actually was looking into different culinary schools, but I wasn't
Mhm.
sure which one I wanted to go. So I actually took 2 years in community college. I went to
Mhm.
Mission College in Santa Clara. And,
Mhm.
I just did my general education classes there. And then during one semester, we had a college fair where there, a bunch of different colleges from around the
Oh.
US came by, and
Mhm.
a representative from Johnson and Wales University was there.
Oh,
So
wow.
I talked to her, and we kind of got more to talking about my interests and what I wanted to do. And
Mhm.
so I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go to the school. And I was really happy to hear they at that time they had 4 campuses across the U.S. and the only campus that was close to California was in Denver, Colorado. So
Mhm.
I knew
Mhm.
I didn't want to go all the way to the East Coast for
Mhm.
my schooling. So I was really glad that they had a location in Denver. And so I chose that location. And that's where I ended up. Yeah.
And what was it in particular? Was their curriculum based on culinary arts, or was it pastries in particular, or was it restaurant industry? Kind of what made that a good fit for you?
So I specifically chose Johnson and Wales University over than you heard about Cordon Bleu or the
Yeah, I've heard
CIA
of
before.
you right, exactly. I think that was kind of what I think as a total naive person to the restaurant industry. I think I've heard of those 2. I think those are kind of the delineation points for me, at least from my reading is, Cordon Bleu, Culinary Institute of America, or self-trained apprenticeship model, but tell me kind of what
Right.
your experience was.
Yeah, so like I said, I chose Johnson and Wales University over those types of schools because I really liked what they offered. So they're an accredited university,
Mhm.
first of all, and so they offer not just culinary classes. They offer, business. They offer
Interesting. Mhm.
management and hospitality. They offer fashion and, and other kind of like niche. Uh,
Sure.
Subjects like that. But they also offered, your general education classes too. So when I was going to school there, I was taking my associate's degree was in baking and pastry, but we also had some general classes that we took alongside those classes too.
Okay, very, very neat. I could see how if someone wasn't totally convinced that they were gonna be a, line cook type of moving through that apprenticeship model, that having some of that having that bachelor's degree or a full degree in hospitality industry could really be a useful adjunct for them. So that's interesting.
Definitely.
In your job, do you feel like most people are coming from the Culinary Institute type of model or the Cordon Bleu model, or are they getting these, degrees like you had, or are a lot of them coming from the self-taught, model? What's kind of your experience with that?
I would say a lot of the younger generations that are coming into the industry are coming from like CIA or Cordon Bleu.
Mhm.
Johnson and Wales, unfortunately, like even though they have a really great, amazing program, it is very expensive. You know, it is
Sure.
on par with some of the
Mhm.
UCs that they will charge. You know, so
Sure, college
yeah.
education. Mhm.
Yeah. So, Cordon Bleu and CIA, they don't charge as much for their degrees. So I
Sure.
think it's a more affordable option
Yeah, that was my next
for
question. Yeah, that was my next question was if you have a rough estimate about what the curriculum or, like, maybe the cost and time length of Cordon Bleu or, Culinary Institute, what those would be.
right. I think those Cordon Bleu programs, they're 2-year programs for an associate's, and I'm not
Mhm.
sure if they offer any classes in management, in hospitality. 'Cause I haven't really looked into it
Okay.
really.
Okay, sure.
But I know, you know, when I went to school at Johnson and Wales, they did offer like after I got my associates in baking and pastry, I went into my
Mhm.
bachelor's in food service management.
Yeah,
So,
sure. Yeah, makes sense.
mm.
And then after you finished that formal education, you went straight into the kitchen or kind of what was the next step?
So we actually had a lot of opportunities to do like internships and stages throughout our program. And so I had to do, I think, a minimum of 2 or 3 internships too during my program to complete my degree.
Oh, wow.
Basically, my first professional kitchen that I worked with was at a country club
Oh, okay.
in the Denver area. And so
Mhm.
I did a few months with them, and it was really small. We didn't do a lot of production because it was just me and the executive pastry chef there.
Oh,
But
wow.
I did learn a lot. A lot of like the kitchen etiquette that you couldn't really learn in classes. And just working in a different space, I would say. So,
Yeah, and working one-on-one with an experienced, professional, I'm sure was
mhm, mhm,
worthwhile.
yeah.
And so you mentioned stage. I think that's a niche term for the culinary industry, but I'm definitely interested in hearing more. So is stage kind of the formal name for the internship type of model that many, I guess, junior chefs or wannabe chefs kind of go through?
Yeah, so basically, a stage is basically it's almost kind of like an internship, but like you said, it's a more formal term in our industry. It doesn't always it's not always paid too, which the industry doesn't really say much about. But if you're lucky and stage for a higher end company, they might pay you during that time. Most companies now, if you are applying for a management position or a higher position, you'll almost most likely have to do a stage and a
Sure.
tasting at the end of it. So
Mm,
during that time, you come up with the menu. It depends on what the hiring manager expects of you, but most of the time, it's like you have to come up with a menu of a few things, and you only have a couple of hours to prepare it
I
and
see.
and it goes from there. So
Hands-on test.
yeah,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
definitely,
And so and then for you, when you applied for some of these positions, did you have to go through that type of experience?
definitely. My first type of stage or just interview tasting experience was at the Four Seasons. I
Wow.
I applied there as a cook one position, so it's kind of right underneath the supervisor position at the time. But
Mhm.
it was like definitely a higher position that they wanted us to stage for, and so I had a 2 day tasting. I was given the option of a 1 day or a 2 day, and I chose 2 day because there was a lot of things that I really wanted to bring to my menu. And with pastry, there's a couple things that you need to let it rest overnight for
Sure,
it to
sure.
be the best product.
Mm, very cool. Do you remember what you made?
Let me see. Oh my gosh, it was so long ago. And it was just it goes by so quick, and you're so focused on everything. for pastry, you have to be so organized and so precise. And so I spent the first few days before my stars, planning out my recipes and making sure I had emailed the chef that was hiring me, like all the things that I need and everything.
Mhm.
But I think I had to make a couple breakfast pastries. I think I had to
Mm.
do one plated dessert, like you would see at like a dinner on a dinner menu. And I had to do a couple items that were made specifically for banquets. So it's like
Okay.
almost like petite desserts that you would kind of see on like banquet lines. So, yeah.
Oh, very cool. So when you start the job search process, are people emailing chefs of different restaurants that they think they're interested in? Because I imagine there's a certain goal to, stage or go to a higher level restaurant to build your resume, to reach a certain point, but how does that work for, somebody actually experiencing it?
So I know most of the kids who come right out of school, they actually either go back to the place where they did their internships, and
Mhm.
because they've already built a relationship with the executive chef there. So, and I know it's a lot easier for them to get like just say an entry level line cook job there, just because they know how the kitchen is run
Sure.
already, and they already have a relationship with the management there too. And it's really all about connection too in
Ah, I
the
see. Yeah.
industry. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then would you say most of the people you're meeting or interacting with, is the goal to continue climbing a certain ladder, or is it to eventually branch out on their own? I imagine there's a certain amount of both, but kind of what's your experience with what people like doing in the future, in this industry?
Definitely. I mean, I meet a lot of people with different ambitions in this industry. There's a lot of people that are very happy with working as a baker their whole life, just doing a lot of mass production. But there's a lot of people that are very ambitious and want to own their own restaurant or their own bake
Sure.
shop one day. And so, those people that are very ambitious, they work very hard to get where they are. And so it's also not it's it's common for a lot of people who are ambitious to kind of jump in between jobs too. And you really don't, a lot of other industries, you really don't see a lot of jumping between jobs and such. But
Right, right.
right now, a lot of the younger people who are ambitious and want to climb the ladder, they want to jump between jobs because also they want to build connections. They want to,
Mhm.
get different experience everywhere. And so
Right.
that's kind of how they start building and climbing the ladder.
Right, I think anybody that's watched Top Chef has the experience of seeing, "Oh, this person was this person's sous chef," and then open their own restaurant, so, like you're saying, a lot of it is gaining this diverse set of skills, making the right connections so that if someone wanted to branch out on their own, they, 1, can show that they have the experience necessary, but also they have support from people who have been very successful before, so that makes a lot of sense, that model.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what some pros and cons are, in pastry chefs, particular, but in the restaurant industry at large?
Definitely. Pros. I would say like people don't go into this industry because it pays a lot.
Mhm,
That's
mhm,
what I would say. People go into this industry because they're very passionate about what they do. And,
mhm,
they love that feeling of being validated in their industry when they present their food to other people
mhm,
and actually see the enjoyment from it. And there's also the creative aspect of the industry too.
mhm,
Food is so, freeing, and like you can just experiment with it in just any
mhm,
way that you can. And just people love that too. So I would say those are the top things about being in this industry, just making someone smile or, making their day just with food is a great feeling.
absolutely. Tell me some of the cons. I mean, you mentioned the salary in particular. You don't have to go into, details for yourself, but tell me about, generalities, and also tell me a little bit about the lifestyle because I know that, certainly in movies and pop culture, I mean, the lifestyle of being in the kitchen, being the baker, pastry chef, and you mentioned the bakers at Facebook having to do those overnight shifts. I mean, there's definitely a very real hard work ethic that comes along with the restaurant industry.
It definitely is, Chris. A lot of the Food Network shows and just any of the cooking shows in general that you see on TV are just very glorified, sparkling kitchens and here and there, but the definitely the cons of this industry is that our like chefs work very hard, and they don't have a lot of free time. And like I said, if they are ambitious and they want to climb the ladder, some chefs will work over 12 hours a day just at the restaurant and they are standing on their feet the whole time, you know.
Right,
A lot of them don't take breaks. A lot of them barely eat during their
right,
shifts because they don't have time to, they have it's just a lot of like small work to do, and so this is basically their life.
mm,
Before I went to Facebook, I definitely kind of had that path where I was working, over 10 hours a day, and that was kind of my life. And I didn't have any weekends. I didn't, all of my holidays were taken over by like special events. And it was just like, it's just the one thing that I would say they didn't really prepare us for that in culinary school, but we just really had to learn it for ourselves. So
right,
I made the
right.
choice to move to the tech culinary industry because I
Mhm.
know that during for that path they have a more stable schedule. I don't have to work crazy amounts of overtime, but
Right,
I
yeah.
still get to be creative in my
Yeah.
field too.
Yeah, yeah, it certainly seems like that there's definitely a path of the ambitious chef that I think we see in certain movies and, on Top Chef, I mean, that's kind of the role that those people fulfill is they're young, they're tattooed, they're working hard, they're staging at multiple different celebrity chefs' restaurants with the goal of opening up their own place, and I think that's like you said, a glorified manifestation of it, but the
Definitely.
route to get there is, paved with really, really hard work, and the end result is that person has to, eat, breathe, live their restaurant. And the margins in the restaurant industry, I think, I'll put some links to the episode. The margins are very, very challenging. So it's like you said, not for everyone, but there are routes that don't include that, and that's important for people to know. All right, just taking a quick break to remind listeners if you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe on Apple or Spotify. Also, follow us on Twitter or Instagram at How Do I Become One with the number one. Give us feedback or suggestions about episodes you'd like to hear. We'll also link to our website there for additional show notes and information about the careers we discuss. Now, back to Nina. I think we'd like to do something a little bit different for this episode. I wanted to do a little lightning round question with you. Is that okay, Nina?
Sure, yeah, sounds fun.
I'll give you two options. They're going to be mostly restaurant industry, pastry chef related. Maybe you could just give me your answer and then a little brief review of why you chose that response. Are you ready?
Sure, yeah.
All right. Butter or sugar?
Butter, definitely. Um, you cannot replace butter in it's really hard to replace butter in recipes. There's definitely a lot of ways. There's a lot of sugar alternatives out there now,
Mm-hmm.
and but just with the richness and texture that you get from butter in baked goods, there's just like no replacing that. There's a lot of alternative butters on the market, like vegan butters, but most of the baked products don't come out as well when you do it with real butter.
Uh-huh. And a lot of your work as a pastry chef is not just these sweet desserts. It sounds like you guys are doing a fair amount of more savory.
Yeah.
Well, that'll fit well. Next question: sweet or savory?
I love savory. A lot of people think that since I'm a pastry chef, I have a huge sweet tooth, but I actually prefer savory over sweet.
All right.
I work around sweet stuff so much that I'm almost desensitized to it.
Yeah, and so
I mean,
that's personal preference. What about to bake? Are you is it easier or better or more fun for you to do sweet or savory things that you're
I
making?
I honestly love doing the savory just because it's like,
Mhm.
there's another round of ingredients that you can play around with, you know? Um,
Sure.
I love just doing savory pastries. Like in the morning, we did a couple of like, pastries with like goat cheese or different type of cheeses or like different types of meats in them. And that was fun to incorporate and rather than like working with the usual pastry ingredients that you would see.
Sure, sure. Okay, hot or cold?
Ooh, I would choose hot, definitely. Um, Definitely one of my weaknesses is a fresh, hot chocolate chip cookie right out of the oven. I mean,
Mhm.
who cannot? Who can't deny that, right?
Yeah, even with your elite training, the simple things in life.
It really is.
So with sweets, chocolate or fruit?
I love chocolate, especially dark chocolate. There's just so many applications and ways that you could do chocolates. When I was working at the hotel, we actually did a line of chocolates too that we made by hand, and so
Oh, wow.
we call it artisan bonbons. And so those are different than like the truffles that you would see in some candy
Mhm.
stores because these like bonbons that we would call them like they're most of them are hand painted, and we use expensive chocolate to do it, and then all the fillings can be very creative too. So
Oh, that sounds great, yeah. So culinary school or, self-taught?
Uh, that's a that's a tough one. I believe both is really good in the industry, but I am partial to culinary school just because you really get to receive formal training there. There's a lot of there's a lot of like techniques that the professors, because they've worked in various restaurants before, that they can teach
Mhm.
you also, and you kind of get to have that already like um, companionship from your classmates too.
Sure, sure. No,
But
that sounds
what I
nice, yeah.
touched on the job training too, I don't want to push it to the side, but I believe on the job training is essential too. And so I know a couple of people who have, just gone into the industry right
Mhm.
out of, right out of high school without going to a formal culinary school, and they have done very well for themselves too.
Yeah, it sounds like work ethic is kind of the unifying theme there, it's all
Yes,
about how hard you're willing to push yourself and get out of your comfort zone and really just go for it.
exactly.
Nina, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right, Chris, thank you so much. I hope it gives a lot of insight to people who are, interested about this industry. So, yeah.
Thanks again for listening to the How Do I Become podcast. As we mentioned earlier, please subscribe if you're interested in hearing more, and follow us on social media at Twitter and Instagram at How Do I Become One, where you can let us know how we're doing and give us suggestions for things you want to hear.